What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another virtual Pitt mailbag. Your Pitt beat writers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are here once again to answer your questions. I am Noah Hiles. He is Chris Carter, and Chris, it is not good times in the Pitt football program right now. I was there in Louisville. Obviously, you watched from afar. We were both at the facility this afternoon. Monday was when we're recording this, and yeah, not good. Not anywhere near where this program wanted to be at this point in the season.
A lot of people had this team. Heck, I had this team listed as a team that was going to contend to win the ACC Coastal, look good in doing so, and have a chance to really repeat as ACC champions. As it stands right now, they're not looking like they'll even win the Coastal. They have a lot to answer for. But I do think that this is still a talented roster being held back by one position that just can't get its stuff together. I think that's the big question that everybody is really concerned about.
Yeah, a lot of questions, a lot of emails after this one, a lot of comments on our stuff. I appreciate everyone who reads and comments. Love getting feedback.
Absolutely.
But we won't waste any more time. We'll just get into it with the questions. Had this one sent to me a lot. We're just going to nip it in the bud right now. Ted was one of many people who asks, is Pat Narduzzi's job in jeopardy? Ted, and to everyone else who asked me that, no, it's not. He's not going to get fired this year. They just extended him. And if you just look at how some other coaches have kind of had their long of a leash through their, tenure here at other prominent or big time programs, I would say, big money making programs at Pitt. You don't have a reason to fire Narduzzi compared to others. I get the frustration with you just look at how his time here is gone. There's been talent. You feel like not many groups really got the most out of what they had to offer. And after last year, a lot of people probably felt that this was a program that can consistently win maybe 9-10 games based on what they had returning, and maybe a new level of expectations were set. And that doesn't look to be the case here. I get why that would upset people, but no, they're not going to fire him. Not anytime soon. Do you agree with that, Chris?
Of course. Here's another thing too. Pat Narduzzi stabilized the program after where it could have spiraled. Let's be real. After Paul Chris left, the Panthers were 6-7. They were 4-4 in the conference. They hadn't had a winning record in the conference since Todd Graham left the program in less than a year, when they were 4-3 in the conference that year, and they had a losing record overall. Like, Pitt was had the chance to nosedive and become a really bad football
A
program.
Rutgers. They could have been a Rutgers. They could have been,
They could
one of
absolutely
those.
be a Rutgers right now. And Pat Narduzzi stepped in, and he's had some not great years. He had back-to-back 8-win years. Did have a 5-win year in 2017. But like, at the same time, you got to look at it and be realistic. Like, he's had 3 8-win seasons. 2020 had a chance to really fall off the rails, and I want to get back to this with some of our questions that are coming up here. But they rallied, finished 6-5, and then last year you get an ACC championship. You finished ranked 13th in the country. This program could be a lot worse off without Pat Narduzzi. And yeah, you know what? There's plenty of criticism to make about him. You could say he's not the best in-game coach. He doesn't have the greatest offensive scheme. He's very stubborn. When he sticks to one thing, he sticks to one thing. But I think one thing that you've seen over time, he gets players to want to stick around. I think this is a huge part of it. Part of him and his stubbornness was, I think, led to the program being the way that it was, and Kenny Pickett wanting to return. Kenny Pickett could have left after 2020 and said, you know what? This program ain't doing much. I just went through another mediocre season. Let me just go to the NFL right now. I'll be a 3rd-round pick. I'll make some money, and we'll go with that.
Or he could have transferred to another program at the Division I level.
Absolutely. And he stayed with Pitt. Did one last year, and it was the most memorable season Pitt has had since like the 1970s. So like this is if you're gonna take the bad from Pat Narduzzi, and you can absolutely acknowledge it, you have to take the good, and he's brought you a lot of that.
All right. So in the spirit of people wanting coaches fired, let's go over to the offensive coordinator. Hank wants to know, do you think Pitt would fire Cignetti after just one season? I don't know about this one. I don't think so. But if it keeps going as bad as it's going, I think we've learned that Pat would rather be critical about. I think Pat would rather put the blame on a coach than a player. It seems that, in my time covering Pitt, which hasn't obviously been very long, but just even as an outsider, I kind of recognize that he does not like to put the blame on his players. He'll blame a position group that he knows has leaders within it and they can handle some criticism. But as far as pointing out individuals and anything, so, I mean, he's not going to do that. And considering that you can really point to one player on the offense as to why things really haven't worked out. Well, it's a team game. I understand that, but this quarterback's such an important position. It's just not working out because of how bad Slovis has been the last couple of weeks. There's just no denying that. But yeah. I don't think he would just blame Slovis. I do think if this team only wins 6 games, Cignetti is in risk of not coming back next year. I don't know about. Do you agree with that?
I kind of do, and here's the reason why. People talk about Mark Whipple like he was some beloved offensive coordinator. Pitt fans hated Mark Whipple up until about halfway through last year. Like when Pitt beat Clemson, everyone was like, wait a second, this offense is pretty good. Like, I like this guy. But like, I can't tell you how many articles I wrote, how many comment sections I handled where people were like, man, Mark Whipple, get him out of here. He's just an idiot. He's just dumb. He doesn't know how to call an offense. And then when people realized, like, oh, snap, this is what he's been building towards, that's what it is. Like, I think the biggest thing that kept Mark Whipple around was the fact that Kenny came back. And when Kenny Pickett came back, it was like, listen, just stick with the offensive coordinator that's been here, stick with the guy that knows him, and let's just grow through that. Frank Cignetti has not connected with Keaton Slovis. I think that's pretty obvious. But at the same time, he's generated rushing offense.
Yeah.
And I think that there's things that have resonated with both Israel Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond, and also the offensive line, even with all the interchanging parts that they've had because of injuries. If you want to keep it because of that and you hope that he can catch on with another quarterback, I'm all for it. But I also would understand being like, hey, you know what? We need a quarterback whisperer because we're going with another guy next year, and we need somebody who's going to challenge them in this way. And I like Frank Cignetti a lot as a person. I've had really pleasant conversations with him. I think that he's a good football mind. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's scheming up. But I think part of what Frank's approach is that he is very. He talks to you in a way, he treats you like an individual. He doesn't talk down to you like he's the coach and you're the player. It's just the way that I've seen him operate. He doesn't like grip you up when you make a mistake and be like, you better step up right the heck now. And I think that that's part of what Pitt has seen with their quarterback position. He's not like, I don't think he's in these meeting rooms chewing out Keaton Slovis. I think he's in these meeting rooms like, hey, Keaton, you see that? You got to be better. I'm trusting you to be better. And that's just that. He's not, it's not like Bill Cowher with his chin out and his spit coming out of his mouth because he's so mad. It's not like that kind of coaching. And different coaches coach different ways. I just think that's not him right now. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I just say, if I'm Pat Narduzzi, if I'm Heather Lyke, if I'm looking at this football program and, like Kenny Minchie is the quarterback that they got coming in, and they're hoping he could be the future. If he is a guy you hope to become your starter, you got to assess, how do you think he'll interact with this guy, and how do you think he'll help develop this guy? That's the major question you ask at OC.
And that's another reason why I'm not optimistic about Cignetti having a long future here, is because I don't know if his scheme matches what Minchie's playmaking abilities are. And I don't think you need to fire an offensive coordinator for a kid who's still in high school right now. I think that would be a really dumb decision, regardless of, even if you have Arch Manning coming in, you can't just fire someone for a guy who's not even on your roster yet. But I do think that you need to assess what type of player that you're bringing in. And with Minchie being one of the highest recruits that they have, I mean, they're going to put a lot of stock into him. And if he doesn't mesh well, it might not be this year, but it might be worth trying to find someone who can kind of fit into his system better, or find a system that suits the personnel that you have. So I don't know. I would say it's definitely the odds of Cignetti being fired are definitely higher than Narduzzi. I'll say that. And we round out our trio of early exits or departures with Homer asking, do you expect to see more Pitt offensive players enter the transfer portal if the struggles continue? And I think that's a good question. We've already seen one Pitt player transfer, and that's Jaden Bradley. We actually asked Pat Narduzzi about that on Monday afternoon. He said, go ask him. I haven't had the chance to reach out. Probably by the time you're watching this or reading this, I will have reached out, and maybe we'll have a report on that If he responds, who knows? But I don't know. I mean, that's the world of college football we live in. You look at what happens when teams with high expectations don't play up to those expectations. Guys leave. You see people sitting out and looking for their next opportunity elsewhere. And it wouldn't shock me to see someone else go. I haven't heard any rumors about anything, but I don't think many people on Pitt's offense are happy right now. And I get that. And if you're a receiver or if you're maybe another running back, I don't know. I don't know. Because I haven't asked any of the players on the team if they're going to transfer, but if it started to happen, especially if this continued to go poorly. I mean, if Pitt turns it around and gets a win either against Syracuse or North Carolina in the next 2 weeks or both, if it's both, things are a lot different here for Pitt. But let's just say they win one of those 2 games, then things probably feel a little bit better than how they do now. However, if they drop their next 2 contests, they fall to under 500 on the year, yeah, you're probably going to see guys leaving the transfer portal. I can't predict who that will be, but I'd have to think that someone else would. Would you agree with that, Carter?
I mean, I feel like you almost got to agree with it at this point, that with especially on offense, when you're not succeeding. Now, maybe not the offensive line, maybe not the running back position, because they're getting the play, they're getting the love. But you looking forward to this passing offense, like if there's no hope that this passing offense is going to figure it out, why are you sticking around to wait to see if that's the case? Like what are you actually going to get out of sticking around there? And again, it's not to say that there's nothing to stick around for. I do think that you should stick to your program. I think most times, unless someone's not committing to you, someone's not giving you playing time, and you're not getting it, and you feel like, hey, I could do more somewhere else. There's plenty of transfer decisions that are very legitimate and justified. But when you look at production like this and you're thinking, man, I got to show the world that I can be a number 1 type of player, it's tough to look at this passing offense and be like, I'm going to stick around and figure it out. One thing I think that shouldn't be overlooked in this scenario, and I'm not saying that I've heard this, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but you got a star tight end potential in Gavin Bartholomew.
Yeah.
He's been targeted 21 times this season.
Yeah.
For retrospect, that's not in the top 50 in the country.
Yeah.
And I get the Pitt's are running offense first right now. But I mean, you got tight ends at Ball State, Iowa, Central Michigan, Purdue, East Carolina, Syracuse, Memphis, Arkansas State, Bowling Green, Rutgers, random tight ends that are getting more play than him. And if I'm him and I'm saying, like, man, somebody saw me leap over a Tennessee player on national football and be the number 1 play on Sports Center, maybe I could go somewhere like Alabama or USC
or just a
Florida.
step up anywhere. And I would go along with him. I think the only other player I think that Pitt would really mind losing that I could see transfer. And again, this is just speculation. Jared Wayne.
We are not saying, yeah.
Yeah, Jared Wayne is another player that I think that he has a year of eligibility, and he's good enough where I think he could go to another Power 5 program. I mean, you look at the other guys, who else is going to – where's Konate Mumfield going to go? This was his level up. You're not going to make a lateral move based on what you've done here at Pitt if you're Mumfield right now. He'll be the first to say he hasn't produced the level at which he hoped to. So if he leaves, he's going to a smaller program. Same for Bub Memes. Same for, any other receiver, really. And I don't think – I apologize for my dog barking there.
Totally fine.
Any other receiver is not going to go anywhere because they don't have any leverage. And running backs are probably going to stick around too, because we move on to the next question. Will Izzy be gone next year? I think he will be. I think it's a no-brainer at this point. Just looking at what he's able to achieve, like his skill set, I think he is an NFL running back or an NFL ready back. 1, 2, I think his stock's going to be super high simply because of how young he is. He's only 20 years old and he's a junior because he enrolled in kindergarten at 4 years old. So the fact that he's so young and looks to have the skill set necessary to be an instant contributor for an NFL backfield, I think Izzy will probably go pro. And again, this is just speculation. These were questions that were asked of us. And because with that idea that Izzy's going to be gone next year, I think that another valuable guy you want to have back if you're Pitt, Rodney Hammond, probably doesn't leave, because this is a run-first offense. They will
Right.
have offensive linemen back, and he will be the focal point of the offense. So I think you get to keep Hammond simply because I think Izzy's gone to the NFL next year. Would you agree with that, Chris?
I do agree with that. I think Izzy is a gone factor right now. I think that, like, not and doesn't want to be with Pitt, but it's like succeeding, you got to strike, especially when you're a running back. Um, um, this is a guy who, like you said, is 20 years old and just turned 20. Like, he just turned 20 like 2 weeks ago.
It was like October
So
5th, I
by
think,
the
is his
time the NFL
birthday.
draft
Yeah.
comes, exactly. Oh, it's like you wrote a great story about him where you talked about his
Yeah,
background
right.
and like met his family and
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but in all seriousness, like that kind of stuff, like if you're an NFL scout, you're like, wait a minute. I get to get this superstar guy who broke Tony Dorsett's record, has ridiculous speed, sees the field very well, and blocks and pass protection and catches the football, and he's 20. I
Mm-hmm.
get that. I think it's, and especially like we've only seen this half of the year, because I think part of this is also, and I alluded to this earlier, but I think that the Pitt is not done this year. Like they're not going to be ACC champions, but they can have a run where they're competitive this year, and they put up some good performances to end out the year, and maybe they get to 8 wins, maybe 9 wins if they get crazy. But if they do something like that, and if Israel Abanikanda is the highlight of those, that could be what boosts him to a lot of NFL scouts and puts him in that conversation for maybe he's one of the top running backs off the board. I mean, and again, that doesn't mean he's top 20 in this NFL draft, but if he's selected by before the end of day 2, I think he would take that. And I think in the NFL, with the way that some running games go, like I think he would be a quick start guy who could play really well, catch on somewhere. And because again, he's 20 now, he'll be 20 when he plays his first game in the NFL if he was to be drafted this year. Uh, that means by the time his rookie contract's up, he'd be 24, and a lot of NFL teams would want to pay for a
Right.
24-year-old running back who's a superstar. So again, that's way down the road,
Or who
but it
just has
just
4 years of NFL experience.
exactly. And
Yeah.
it speaks to why this is now the moment I think Izzy's going to the NFL. But like you said, Rodney Hammond, I think, is ready. I think he's gonna be happy to step in that role.
So based upon what you were kind of talking about there toward the end, we'll go with this question next, and it comes from George. Do you think this Pitt team will mail it in? I'll let you answer this one first, Carter.
No, I don't. I covered this Pitt team in 2020 when they got smoked in the middle of the season. Like there was a chance for disaster in 2020. People don't remember. They lost a 1-point game to NC State where they dropped a 2-point conversion in a game that they lost by 1 point. Then they lost a 1-point game to BC where in overtime they scored a touchdown and then missed the extra point. And then Kenny Pickett is all of a sudden hurt. He's missing. They lose on the road in Miami in a bad way. Then they get utterly demolished by Notre Dame at home in one of the most embarrassing Pitt losses I've seen. And then all in one, you already had Jalen Twyman sitting out the season. Paris Ford, who at the time was projected to be like a first or second round safety NFL prospect, he announces that he's not coming back for the rest of the season. It looked like a disaster. It looked like this Pitt team is falling apart. They went on the road in Florida State, and, with every reason to just mail it in, they found a way to get a really big win. They finished the year strong with 3 straight wins to back up the season, to save the season, really. And then the next year was the year that they went and won the ACC championship. And I'm not saying they're destined to do that, but this is a program that, and a lot of the guys, Brandon Hill, that's where he made his comeuppance for Pitt. He had a pick 6 against Florida State. That's where he kind of figured. Eric Hallett, his rise also came during that time. I think there's a lot of guys that lived through that era that are like, no. This season ain't over yet. We got a lot to say about this. Now, granted, I think it won't matter if the quarterback position does not at least stabilize. Just don't be terrible. And as much as Keaton Slovis, it was supported, and you wrote about this in your Monday article, Noah. As much as Keaton Slovis was supported by Pat Narduzzi, I think a lot of these losses are on him. This team is going to try to find a way to win otherwise. And I think that these players, they've stuck through some rough situations. They'll stick through this one, and you're going to see the Panthers fight to the end of the season.
Just to piggyback on what you said, I think a reason you won't see this team mail it in is based on the fact that they have a lot of talented seniors. These
Yeah.
aren't guys who, I mean, a lot of their good players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they don't have much eligibility left.
Yeah.
So they're not
John
looking.
Morgan, where's he going to
Yeah,
go?
they're not looking to transfer. They're looking to put good stuff on tape to help their draft stock. And so even if it's selfish, they're looking to finish this year out strong for their own personal interests. You have
Right.
a lot of guys on this team who are borderline drafted on the third day of the draft or not getting picked. And if
Mm-hmm.
they play this second half of the season well, it might result in their name being called in the 6th or the 7th round. And that's why you need to keep playing hard. If you're any one of those seniors who starts on defense or some of the guys on the offensive line, there are a whole bunch of people who have individual interests. And again, this team still believes it can they still technically could go to the ACC championship. They would really pretty much need to win out in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, this is a group that has a lot of pride. They take pride in that 2020 finish that you mentioned, Chris. After going winless in the month of October, they were able to rectify the ship and at least get a winning record. And then last year, I mean, everyone affiliated with Pitt football like beams with pride when you bring up 2021.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that they're capable of this, and if they were able to still, finish with a 9-win season, including a bowl victory. So if they just lose one more game throughout the rest of the regular season and they go to a decent bowl and they win, they'll call a 9-4 year, for all intents and purposes, not the worst thing that could have happened considering where this team is right now. This is a veteran group. If it was a young team, I would think different, especially if it was with a coach that hadn't been here long and with all these kids who were around or weren't around pre-transfer portal era, but like these guys have been together before the game of college football changed, before the world changed with the pandemic. This is a tight-knit group. They still believe in each other. I think they are going to keep fighting hard. But again, I guess, you never know in this world of college football. Maybe we will see some opt-outs. Maybe we will see some more guys going to transfer portal, but I do think that, say what you want about Narduzzi's teams, they play hard for him. They really do, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We'll wrap it up with this question. And it's kind of, this is probably something we should have put on here earlier because it goes along with some of the questions that were priorly asked, but a lot of negative questions this week. You could tell Pitt lost by 14 on the road to Louisville, huh? Is Pitt at risk of losing notable recruits due to this bad season? That's from Mike. No, they're not. I mean, they might be, I guess, a little bit, but like I think Pitt is a program where you have like these tiers. Pitt's on the tier where they're probably relying on the portal more than high school recruiting right now anyway, personally. And, when you're a program that's not landing a ton of 5 and 4 stars, that's how you should be doing it right now. And I think with so many Power 5 coaches already been fired, you look at, teams like Nebraska, teams like Wisconsin, those programs normally recruit better than Pitt. So there are good players out there to get from those rosters. Georgia Tech, another team that beat Pitt. I wouldn't say they have a better program than Pitt, but they have guys that are good enough to at least beat them on one Saturday in the fall of year. So I think that that's probably where their primary interest is anyway. I don't see them losing anyone who's already been committed. And overall, I mean, I guess if you're a kid who was like fell in love watching Pitt last year and saw, oh, okay, wow, this is an ACC contender. That's one thing. But if you did your research, you kind of know that, Pitt's an 8-win program. It's kind of what it's been since Narduzzi's been here. There's been a couple of years where they've been a little bit more. There's been a couple of years where they've been a little bit less. But for the most part, they're an 8-win program, and that's kind of what you're getting as far as signing up for. And I think there's still reason to be optimistic that they can be more than that. But I think most high school kids kind of know that. Again, I wasn't here when Narduzzi had his 5-win season. I don't know how many recruits they lost because of that. But I'd have to imagine that, one bad year doesn't hurt your recruiting too bad in the world of college football.
I don't think it's going to crush them with everyone, but I will say this. I think that the ultimate sign to watch, if you're going to watch anyone, is Josier Whittington. He committed to Pitt back in the spring, I want to say. And he's a 4-star defensive tackle. And April 18th was when he committed. And he's first team All-State. He's one of the top ranked defensive linemen in the country, a 4-star player. He's a guy that, I think Charlie Partridge can't wait to get his hands on and to see him develop. And he could be like the next coming of like what Kalijah Cansey is for Pitt. But Jahsir Whittington's a guy or kid right now, he's in high school, and, he just saw Pitt lose another rough ACC game to an opponent they should have beat. And this past weekend, guess where he went to visit? Penn State, and he was at the whiteout game, and he got to see over 100,000 people in unison wearing white and beating up on Minnesota. And that's not an easy thing to beat all the time. If you're a high school kid and you see that and you're like, man, there's something enticing about that, I could see that. But I will say Jahsir Whittington has expressed a lot of confidence and excitement to come to Pitt. It doesn't mean that he's going to switch out to Penn State. And I think that he's felt the love. I believe he was here for the backyard brawl, so he got to see that too.
Yeah.
So again, it's not saying that he will leave, but if you're worried about someone leaving, look at a player like him. If he doesn't leave, then I don't think you lose anybody of substance that you're building forward with right now. I think a lot of these kids that they've chosen like you'd need a really, really bad loss, like Pitt basketball versus the Citadel. They lost their lone 4-star kid last year under Jeff Capel's program when that kind of loss happened. And I'm not, even though that this has been rough, I don't think that any of these losses are comparable to something like that.
And there's still a chance this isn't a disaster season. I think if you win 5-6 games, then you definitely put yourself at risk to losing players that you really were depending on committing to your program. But like I said, they have 2 opportunities in the next 2 weeks to beat a ranked team. One of them will be a home game against an opponent that they've traditionally done very well against, with Syracuse. I don't know how they're going to really stop North Carolina this upcoming week, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. This is the same head coach who's beat the number 2 team in the country twice in his tenure here. So
Clemson and Dabo Swinney were celebrating, 50 straight wins or something like that at home. You know who that last team to beat him at their stadium was? Pat Narduzzi's Panthers.
Yeah, this might not be a bad season. It might just be a regression to what, again, Pitt has been over the last close to a decade now, which is just kind of like an 8-win team. And if that's the case, then I don't know how many kids don't kind of already understand that. So even if Pitt tries to sell itself as something else, if they do some research, that's pretty much what they've been. So that wraps it up. We appreciate everyone reaching out and asking questions. You can continue to ask us questions that we'll use for next week. You can message us both on social media or shoot us an email. Our emails, you can find them on Twitter when we tweet out the mailbag stuff, or you can find it on the file at the Post-Gazette's website. That will include an embed to this video. For Chris Carter, I'm Noah Hiles, saying we'll see you next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.